Welcome to Q on the Rocks. This is a special edition that we are doing in partnership with Nick's Rides for Friends, the new Through the Eyes of an Addict 3-part series. Today I am joined with Bryan Bush, and he is going to be talking about his journey. Bryan, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me, Robert.
All right, so I think what I want to get started with first is, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now?
Sure. Right now I am a CCAR, which is a certified recovery coach, as well as a provisional CERPA, which is a certified peer advocate, and I am employed through CHAD, which is the Confidential Help for Alcohol and Drug Treatment outpatient here in town. And I'm also a peer advocate for Nick's Ride for Friends.
Fantastic. So you definitely have decided to take your experience and help other people, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, we were having a little conversation before. I was just trying to get an idea of your story. And you hear a lot of times how people have had an injury or some other things, and they get put on pain pills, and that's really where their addiction starts. Mm-hmm. Your story is a little bit different than that. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a little background as to how your journey over the last 8 years or so began, and where you feel your addiction actually started?
Sure. So that's that is a good question. It's a deep question because the recovery journey and where the addiction started are definitely two things. I guess where my addiction started, I think it starts way before I ever pick up a drink or a drug. I think that there was some underlying, untreated defects going on within myself internally, and the drugs, the alcohol, were just some sort of external validation that I used to not cope with what was going on inside of me. I've been able to identify some things through this process. I've always been a people pleaser. I've always sought external validations to feel any sort of self-acceptance or self-worth. Even going back to high school, I would create these personalities or personas to kind of float between the groups that I thought were popular and the groups that I thought I needed to feel any sort of validation about myself. So like one year in high school, I'd be rocking the tie-dyes and the Ron John smoke shop shirts and trying my best to grow out my dreadlocks and hanging out with the guys that played bongo drums and listened to Bob Marley and smoked pot. The next year I'd be rocking Tommy Hilfiger and Nautica and Sean John, and doing my best to fit in with the urban crew and listening to rap and talking like a gangster, or what my impression of a gangster was. And by senior year I was wearing Abercrombie and Fitch and Gap and Structure and trying my best to look like an Abercrombie and Fitch model. So I don't know where that initially started, but I know that it was something internally way before I ever picked up a drink or drugs.
Okay. That's interesting, because I think that speaks to the idea of how addiction can truly be a disease, how it is a disease, because you're saying here that basically you are wired to crave and desire these outside sources to make you feel better. Is that fair to say?
I think it is fair to say. I don't think addiction is a moral failure or a lack of willpower. It's been from the American Medical Association, Department of Health. It is a disease, and it was my easiest way to cope with what was going on with me. When I picked up, I did not have to feel, that judgment, the fear of failure, the fear of being accepted by people. Like, I just didn't have to feel anything. I actually felt good. I could do anything.
Mm-hmm. Now, was there things in your childhood? How was your family life? Would you consider it a rough childhood, or were you very supported?
The complete opposite. I grew up as an only child, so I was the best child. Both my parents are still together, which is something that I typically don't see. All my friends growing up, most of their parents were divorced. Both of them worked, blue collar, middle class jobs. So like there were frequent trips to Disneyland, and we had a cottage in the Thousand Islands, boats. I had nice birthday parties, and neither one of my parents, I've never seen either one of them pick up a beer or let alone do any drugs. My grandmother on my father's side was a fall down alcoholic, from the stories that I heard, because she passed when I was about 6, so I don't truly remember. I mean, I can remember smelling the smell of beer and hard liquor on her, like looking back now, but I mean, the stories my father would tell me, like when he was in high school, like he would get called to the principal's office and have to go pick her up off the supermarket floor. He was embarrassed to bring anybody over his house. No, like mine was the complete opposite. Like I probably can identify and be honest the fact that I was spoiled, was always closer with my mother and my grandmother on my mother's side. Like never had a great relationship with my grandfather and my father, probably because they didn't co-sign a lot of my BS, whereas I was grandma's little boy and mama's little boy, and could bat my eyes and get whatever I wanted,
So it made it a little bit easier for you to go to them and instead.
Home life was good.
Yeah.
I had a fear of being bullied, like I was the person with the pool in the neighborhood. I think I was an easy target for people who probably weren't happy with their own childhoods.
Okay.
But there was a little bit of trauma early on. I might have been 7 or 8, and a friend of my parents' friend's child was a little bit older. He might have been 11 or 12, so I'm sure he was just coming into his own for whatever that might be, or discovering what was going on with him. But I just remember us both being in the back seat of the car. I don't know whose driveway we were in. I want to say maybe my parents, but the parents were inside, and I don't know, being like 5, 6, 7 years old, like I started crawling to the front seat, and I just remember him like touching me inappropriately, and like I immediately told my parents about it. But like I think that has created some fears of intimacy down the road for me. But like to answer that question about like why I initially picked up, I think there was a lot of stuff going on that I just wasn't aware at, or had that ability to cope with at the time.
Right. And I mean, being so young, you might not have really realized what was going on necessarily, and how that would end up affecting you later on. Right. So when was it after that? How long after that was it that you had your first drink or first drug?
I remember. So I was actually pretty good up until like 6th grade. Nowadays I don't see that, but like 7th grade, the elementary schools merged. So like all the kids that I had grown up with were merged with the school on the other side of town into the junior high school. New friendships were born, new opportunities arose.
Now, where were you going to school then?
Where was I going?
What city?
Rochester.
Okay, so that's where you grew up. Okay.
The Rock.
The Rock.
But so yeah, junior high, we have all these new opportunities arise, and so like the one kid, I'm not going to mention names, but
of course,
yeah. So like we all started hanging out at his house, and his parents liked to drink, and they smoked cigarettes. So like I remember initially like taking shots of Canadian Mist whiskey, man, and like it just burning my throat, and like it coming back up because I couldn't take it, but like just loved it. And it was new and exciting, and stealing Winston cigarettes from his dad's pack of cigarettes, and it was great, but it was like a weekend thing, we'd hang out there, get away with it, and have a couple shots and walk around. He lived in the suburbs, so it was safe, and probably go ding dong to some houses or egg cars and do some adolescent crap, I don't know, but
Yeah, well, you see it looking back. You think that it's just kind of fun, and
it was.
you were being a little rebellious, and what harm would there have really been to that?
What harm did it lead to?
Exactly, what harm did that actually end up leading to for you? How did that start your journey?
Right. So, I fully have come to believe that the disease that I suffer from, the disease of addiction, is progressive, incurable, and eventually fatal. So, the other thing I really want to identify is the fear, man. I've always had this fear, I don't know if it's something that other people share. I'm sure it is because I hear about it, but when I drank and smoked those cigarettes, like, the fear was gone, so, like, I could do anything. And, like, that's why I've tried to identify stuff from early childhood, like when I mentioned the bullying, like, that fear would make me do anything I could to control my, like, to be safe and be protected. So if that meant, like, giving over my brand new bike to someone, or letting you borrow my brand new action figure that my mom just bought at Toys R Us so you'd like me and I'd feel safe, I'd do it. So enter the drugs and the alcohol. But, man, that progressed so quickly to, like, I remember the first time that I bought drugs, and so we walked down to, like, the 7-Eleven. We had to walk, like, I don't know, a mile and a half into, like, the more urban area, and we got to the 7-Eleven there, and I don't even remember how it came about, but, like, the cashier there, and this was like midnight, like, this is when 7-Eleven, I feel, was open all night long, but man, we bought like a dime bag off him, went all the way back to my friend's house, botched rolling it up, like, we were terrible. We bought papers, we were terrible at it, went all the way back, had him roll it for us, and, like, I can remember the first time that I actually got high, and smoked, and, like, dude, I remember it, like, to this day. Like, I remember laying on, he had, like, these pull-out, they, like, these futons, and they folded back up into, like, stools of some sort, but they were, like, comfy, and I remember laying on that and just, like, feeling I was on, like, the gyrosphere at Seabreeze, like, going back and forth in my head, man, for hours, like, yeah. So it progressed quick, just from, like, I mean within a couple of weeks, like, when we started hanging out, I met him at junior high, started drinking and smoking, and then started getting high. Like, it happened quick.
Wow. And you said, like, 12, 13 at that
junior
point?
High school.
Junior
so,
high,
like, I don't know what grade 7th grade is, nowadays.
Yeah, I think that's around
12th
grade, or around 12 years.
Yeah.
My daughter is going into high school. She'll be 15 next year.
Yeah.
So, 7th grade. So it was relatively early for you, and it sounds like there was some trauma that you were trying to escape. A lot of people would be like, well, so far we're talking some alcohol, some weed that a teenager is experimenting with. But for you, that wasn't the case.
No. So, like, that progressed quickly to where, like, we were drinking every weekend. Like, if we were hanging out, we were drinking. And again, like, that fear of being intimate and being okay with being intimate and just being okay in my own skin and being myself, like, so, like, now girls are getting introduced to the picture, and, like, we're hanging out at people's houses, or we're going to the movies, and, like, I just remember me and my buddy, like, other kids were going with us, like, we formed this big group. They called us the Clique because there was, like, 10 or 15 of us at any given time. We were all into sports, but it was just, like, me and my one dude, like, we were the ones that had to drink on the side, like, and it progressed quickly. Like, I remember, like, by the time we got to, like, junior prom and senior prom, like, what are we talking about? See, like, the ages, I get confused, but, like, I remember, like, you had to be 21 to get into clubs. So, like, we could never get into clubs and bars when we were in high school. But, I had this distant cousin that was head of security at, like, one of the most popular places downtown. So, like, being such a good talker and being able to manipulate and create these personalities, like, we started off there getting in because he knew me. And then, like, I made connections, being young, and we were able to line jump and get into VIP at the other clubs. But, like, in late 90s, like 98 to early 2000s, man, like, this wave of club drugs hit the streets. And again, I don't know if they were just lazy back then, but they all seemed to just have, like, one letter names. Like, there was G, there was K, E for the ecstasy,
yep.
M for the Molly, the MDMA. But, like, man, I'm like 16, 17 years old getting exposed to this stuff. And I mean, like, it's a week, like every weekend, that's what we look forward to, you know? And again, man, just not having to feel anything. And, you know, like, I try really hard not to have like that euphoric recall about it, but like, I remember, like,